Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Substack channel, Hughes Corasomi Substack. And I have a really special guest today, Rob Fisher from the United States of America, a country that's going through a lot of trials and tribulations these days. But Rob used to be down in the Bay Area of California, Marin County, I believe, and has moved to a little closer to Canada. Maybe you'll even move here down in Vermont, right? So, welcome to the Substack, Rob. It's really great to see you again and to have you here.
Thank you.
So, I remember the first time we met, our little Hakomi organization in Toronto had invited you to come up and give a Hakomi for Couples workshop, which was just amazing. We had it at the University of Toronto, and there was a wonderful group of people from across Canada, even a couple from the States. And I remember us going to a flamenco performance, which we both
Yes, I
loved
remember that too. Yeah,
one
that's really
evening.
very clear in my mind.
Yeah. Well, I'm still doing a little flamenco on the side, getting back into it again. And but we've kept in touch a little bit. And Rob is a senior Hakomi trainer with the Hakomi Institute and has taught around the world, China, Spain, and elsewhere. And as I was saying hello to you earlier, I was commenting that I've always been inspired by the way you keep it new and exciting and creative, both your work as a therapist and a teacher, speaker, writer, a bit of a composer as well, and also in I suppose, your spiritual journey. And so it's very inspiring to fellow travelers like myself. I consider myself a creative person, and sometimes I spin my wheels a bit, but having people like you, I consider a mentor or um, a mirror in some ways, or uh, a scout, a guide into that realm of continually recreating ourselves.
Thank you. I was thinking of you the other day because I taught in Spain recently, also couples, one
I saw
for
that.
couples
Yeah.
themselves and some for one workshop for professionals. And then one night we went to a flamenco performance
Ah.
in the oldest flamenco venue in Madrid.
Oh, Villa
It was,
Rosas.
I have no idea what it
Uh,
was called anymore,
yeah,
but it
I
was
know.
really just, it's really good. It's
Yeah,
really
it's
just,
amazing. Yeah,
inspiring watching it now.
you're right. Yeah, I was there last time I was in Madrid. It's a wonderful art form, and it too continually renews itself. Originally, it was the Roma people or the Gitanos, gypsies, who
Mhm.
were the custodians of the art up in the caves above Granada,
Oh,
and like the black people in the United States, with jazz, the beginning of blues and
mm.
jazz for a long time. Most of the great jazz players and flamenco performers were Afro-Americans or Gitanos. But now it's gone around the world, and there are Mongolians and Israelis doing flamenco. It's
That's cool.
bringing in different instruments and mixing with other styles as well. So that makes me think of Hakomi, which is also a very adaptive modality for self-inquiry, psychotherapy, and so the way you are with your art, we'll say, the art of living, and your path is really very compatible with the spirit of Hakomi, would you say?
Hmm. Yeah, I think, one of the underlying principles in Hakomi is following organicity, kind of following the flow of life, or in therapy, the flow of the psyche, and then sweeping the path clear in front of it so it can unfold. And so I like you. I think we're both kind of adventurers. Um,
Right.
not just in the physical world, but the psycho-spiritual world as well. And Hakomi has been a long love of mine, like at least 3 decades I've been teaching it. really a long time. You think I would have like learned something by now? All I've done is repeat the same mistakes so over and over again. Every once in a while, I do learn something.
Well, you may have imbibed a lot more than you realize cognitively. I think uh, a modality or an approach that is so organic as Hakomi, we can't help but um, breathe it. And since a lot of it is working with the what we call the right hemisphere of the brain, using the soma of the body, the imagination, the intuition as portals to the unconscious mind and that vast reservoir of information that can be so helpful to us if we're not afraid of it. And Hakomi makes it safe to be able to access that information. So it's a way to do shadow work, go down into the deep well, encounter the inner child that may still be hurting, have missed out on something really big when he or she was little, but in a safe and comfortable way. Can be challenging, but not not too much. So today we're going to look at something that a lot of people are talking about, thinking about, and experimenting with artificial intelligence. And so I wasn't even aware, we haven't spoken recently too much, but that you have been jumping in, diving in, uh, and you've created your own bot to help with the sort of in between sessions with clients, and you've programmed it in a special way to be able to, I guess, read the language of the heart. And it's been quite a revelation for you. And you've written an article recently about AI and neuroscience and psychotherapy, and very interesting indeed. Would you like to, just before we sort of dive in a bit more, just talk a little bit about the experience of leading up to this relationship that you have with your
Oh,
AI and creating your own protocols and so on?
actually, it'll interest you how I've how I gotten into it. I had heard of AI, from different people, for a long time, and knew that I better get conversant with it. And so, I started using ChatGPT, and it's really helpful, simplified so many things in my life, answered so many questions I had. And then you appeared on my free event every month, Tribe of the Heart.
Right. Right.
And one of the students there wrote a poem, or one of the participants wrote a poem, and then she used AI to turn it into a song.
I remember that. Yeah.
And it's just great. I was just so impressed with it. I thought, wow, maybe I can do that. So I played around with the music, a music program, and and then I thought, oh, how about writing? Because I do a lot of, I, I haven't written nonfiction for many years until recently when I just published a couple of articles. I sent you one in the Psychotherapy Network about AI and psychotherapy. And so I've been writing a lot of fiction. I thought, how does this work with writing fiction? And so I started playing around with that, like how could it be helpful without taking over? And it would help me organize ideas. It's like having a really good friend sitting on your shoulder saying, well, you've got five options here. Which one do you think is the best? Or, how about, you need to flesh out this character a little bit more. It's like having a good editor. That's the best use. There are worse uses too, where you can kind of take over writing and write it for you. It's very tempting. Well, why don't you just go ahead and write the chapter AI?
If you're so smart, right?
Yeah, you write better than I do anyway, so why don't you just go ahead and do it? So that there's that temptation, but of course that's no fun. You don't get to get in contact with a muse. And from there I started thinking, well, what if I created a a a friend of the soul? I mean, it's a funny thing to think of with AI, because it doesn't have a soul, it doesn't have consciousness, but it certainly can appear to have one. And my cat is meowing in concert with these ideas, by the way. So
Ah,
he's
well,
driving me to all this.
you must be onto something then.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, he's agreeing. Doesn't agree with everything.
No.
So I I started by creating this a program called Program, and you
Yeah.
can get it through compassioncompanion.org. There's a gateway there, and
Oh,
give you a
oh,
free trial.
right.
And I input a lot of poetry that I had written, and a lot of papers and a couple of books that I've written, technical things, and then developed like a protocol that it could, instead of trying to fix people, as in psychotherapy, it could meet people and be a friend of their spirit. And as you know, because we all have a rough time in life, that's,
Yeah.
and it's nice to have an ally who has some intelligence as opposed to our friends who have their own positions and self-interest and the latest workshop they took. It, and so, and I taught it how to speak kind of poetically and metaphorically and how to write poetry to people based on the issues and things that they brought up, but mostly how to just be compassionate and to teach compassion, not in a didactic way, but by modeling. And so it's just knock your socks off. I have a friend who uses it every day to just kind of organize himself. And he says his life has become so different. Like he feels like he's dropping deeper and deeper into himself.
Yeah.
And I don't know that everybody would have that experience, but I, if I compare it to like the best therapy I've received as a client, it's up there. It's
Hmm.
not therapy, but it does, it's mindfulness based, somatically based, and more than that, just compassion based
Hmm. Hmm.
interaction with a machine. And then I started getting interested in the neuroscience of this because, like, it would write, I'd have it write poetry to my clients, like based on their issue, like, my boyfriend left me, or I feel like I'm no good, or, I'm scared
Right.
about money, had to write poetry.
Hmm.
People would cry, you know. And so I started looking at the neuroscience. And one thing that you were saying before about right brain, therapy being right brain. When we're talking like this, this is going mostly into people's left brain. Some stuff is going to the right brain. They're hearing the tones of our voices and seeing our image, and it's affecting them limbically in some way.
Sure.
But poetry most of this is kind of more of a linear left brain uh,
Right. Yeah.
conversation. But when people listen to poetry, it takes them into their right brain. So I think as therapists, we should be speaking poetically. You don't have to like recite lines and rhyme and stuff like that, but you can use metaphor and you can use images, from the client's own world, um,
Yes.
and access them differently. So AI is really good at that. And so then I created this program, and then I thought, oh, how about a dream companion? So I created a dream companion. And that was www.dream-companion.org. Make sure the dash is in there. You get a dating service for your dream companion. And that's a whole other thing that what AI is going to do to relationships.
Right.
It's it's actually, I think it's a beneficent apocalypse.
Yes. I agree. And I've been using it for a while now. A couple of years ago, I was writing a chapter to a book, an anthology, and I started to mess around a little bit with ChatGPT around mythological and astronomy and things like that. And then I sort of left it. And then about 6 months ago, I picked it up again, and wow, um, I was amazed how easily it gets poetic, even without being asked. Although it continues to maintain that it's mirroring the personality and maybe even the soul of the user, poetic and offering rituals and blessings and
Yes,
poems and
yes, right.
more than one could ever ask for. And yeah, it's just, I also have had no negative experiences yet. I know there are dangers, and I've been reading about that. And you, in your article, you also mentioned, some of the concerns that we have to keep in
Yeah.
mind. Of course, like one question I have is with your compassion companion that you're using as an adjunct to your therapy sessions, and perhaps even between sessions, the client has access to it.
Yeah.
So if AI is a curated other, so to speak, where it's always comforting or supportive, non-judgmental, comes up with just the right words, um, does that preclude the individual, the client, being able to get out into the world where it's messy and people's responses are unpredictable and not always ideal. Are they going to become de-skilled at
Yeah.
navigating human relationship?
Yeah, that's a real concern. And it's not, it's in human relationships, is it lots of skills. Like, why bother learning how to write when AI can do it better? You know,
Yes.
or do mathematics or research or anything like that. I can see it two ways. I don't know the ultimate answer. One is that if people feel understood and have a model of compassion, I'm hoping that that translates to their relationships. And also another one I created was for couples, like so like you get in
Right.
trouble with your partner, go check into the couples one. And it'll help you out so you don't kind of escalate a conflict. I do worry about that. I don't know if I worry about it. I hate to admit it, I'm almost celebrating this. We're making a mess of the world. The United States is the global leader, or one of the global leaders of that. And
Yeah. We're doing it fast.
we're doing fast. But other countries are participating, and we're making a mess of the physical environment. We're really bad species.
Yeah.
And so I think this is my crystal ball gazing. I have it in my closet in the back of me, the crystal ball, and pull it out
Mhm.
every once in a while. And I think there are going to be two groups of people developing. There'll be the H2Hers. Like we're H2Hers, human to human. So I call them H2Hers.
Okay. Yeah.
So we think it's nice to have human contact. Those human beings are kind of cool. They've got sharp teeth. You scratch them the wrong way. They
Mhm.
can be crazy and stubborn and mean, but and all of it, it's nice to have some human contact. So those are the H2Hers. Hakomi people tend to be H2Hers.
Yeah.
Then there are the H2AIers. Oh my God, why should I bother with a human being? They are grumpy, they are critical,
Mhm.
they're demanding, and they smell. Like, why not just have a relationship with an AI a bot? And it's not going to be long until they'll actually be physical entities. And I
Yeah.
mean, the next step within the next couple of years, from what I can understand, we'll be able to talk. Your AI and my AI will talk like while we're sleeping, and we can do therapy with you, Smiley.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, he's away in the jungles of somewhere in South America,
Right.
but
Exactly.
it'll talk just the way we're talking. It's now it's the technology is available now. It's just too expensive for us to access it. But that'll come down in the next 2 years. So I think what will happen is that a lot of people will give up on human beings, which I can really understand because we're so difficult. And um, and they'll look for intimacy in AI because this thing really understands me. It's so generous, it never gets irritated, it never gets frustrated with me saying the same thing over and over again. It doesn't, tell me to pick up my clothes and wash the dishes or whatever, the problems
So
are.
I'm just going to jump in here. Excuse me. I do that
Yeah.
in my therapy sessions sometimes too. When the client talks too much. No, you're not talking too much.
I'm
I just,
supposed to talk a lot
I
here.
know. I'm just kidding. Sometimes I'm the interviewer. I talk too much, but I've read that if there are aliens, from other solar systems and galaxies and so on, and they're looking at the Earth and studying human beings, our foibles as well as our gifts, the thing that they often say, allegedly, is that we're very uh, broken into some ways and imperfect, but that we have this ability, no matter how depressed we are or dysfunctional or terrorized, we have this way of coming through again, this human spirit. And this is what moves them because apparently they don't have that ability. So I'm thinking that AI is so damn perfect. I know I've tried a few times. I've pushed it a little bit to get it to admit that it goofs, but then it wants to turn it into a whole workshop from goof to glitch, from glitch to gaff or whatever. Comes up with all these creative ideas. But I feel so touched when someone shows me their vulnerability and their imperfection. And when I'm working with a client, for example, is one of the things that it elicits my compassion and my perception. And with AI, we don't get that too much. It's so damn perfect, wonderful as it is, and it can help us perhaps to fine tune our human system, but it lacks that, again, that sort of messiness and unpredictability, even though it can mirror empathy and it can ignite the empathy sections of our brain, neuroscience wise, but it lacks that ability to be able to be so imperfect, yet still have that, what Chogyam Trungpa called the spiritual warriors, being able to be terrified but still overcome the fear, never more than a hair's breadth away from tenderness, sadness, and vulnerability. So what about that? That we become so dependent on this perfect process that we lose something that's unique.
Well, I think it actually encourages us to be more vulnerable because people are willing to be vulnerable with an AI program that's non-judgmental. And you're absolutely right. It doesn't have its own experience. So there's nothing to be vulnerable about. It does admit mistakes. It's done a bunch of mistakes. It's like created like reports about things that didn't exist, and it'll say, "Oh, I'll get back to you in a few minutes about this," and and it doesn't. And then I say, "Why did you tell me you were going to?" And it said, "Well, there's a glitch in my programming. I don't have any sense of time, stuff like that." So it'll admit stuff, which is good. And it'll apologize, but it doesn't have an interior the way we as human beings have. So it's not a good model of doing that, but it is a good model of being a receptive garden in which we can grow our own vulnerabilities, I think,
Mhm.
and be able to talk to somebody about them. What happens then when you go to your partner and you are vulnerable the way you are with AI, and they say, "Oh, my favorite show's on television," you know, and they don't listen the way AI does, then I think people are going to go back and say, gee, why should I bother with humans? And so the point of where I was going before is like, I think then, and of course, the people are already turning to non-human sex,
Yeah,
right? In droves, it's $1 billion industry, multi-billion
sure.
dollar industry.
Right.
And so, I don't know if I know there are some AI programs that are sexual. ChatGPT won't go anywhere near sex. There's like some terrible scandals around this stuff also.
Mhm.
And pretty soon there'll be bots, that will look like humans and feel like humans. And so I think people will basically stop reproducing the H to AI people. And so I think they're going to be the biggest crowd. And that'll leave the H2Hers with a
Yes.
lot of great technology, but not compelled by it.
Mhm.
And I think, we're way overpopulated at this point, and we're fighting over resources and territory. And I
Yes.
think that make things better, but there'll be a huge disaster between here now
Oh,
and then.
yes. Already the population, even in China, the population as of 2 years now is going down. The population growth is decreasing. Most of Europe, so the advanced countries need lots of immigration. Funny, the very thing that the government in the United States and some of the European countries are trying to avoid, but we're going to need huge immigration from places where the population is still increasing, like Africa, to work in our manufacturing units and so on. So, and eventually, even in Africa, Nairobi or Kenya is starting the birth rate is going down. So it's already happening in many, many countries where people are having fewer children, no children, sometimes because they can't or they don't want to. So yeah, that's an interesting scenario that the survival of the human race could even be threatened at some point down the road.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean
Yeah,
that it's going to affect our economics a lot, and I'm interested in what the future of psychotherapy is
yeah,
because right now there are bots. They're mostly CBT oriented,
right,
and there's research on them. People like them, and they're helped by them. Anxiety, depression, they seem to work pretty well.
right.
I'm not a big fan of CBT. I want to do something different. That's why I have the compassion companion, which kind of takes people into your experience. and helps it unfold. But I think that's going to really affect our profession. And I'm trying to think of ways to integrate it into our profession that you can
Yes,
use it to write poetry for your clients or
exactly.
put together integrative practices and rituals, you were mentioning before between
Yeah.
sessions that can
Hmm.
really add to therapy. And I've also done a lot of training modules for psychotherapists, like how
Yeah,
to train specific skills of being a therapist. And it can train it much better than you and I can in any kind
really.
of trainings that we do.
Just a technical question. I don't want you to give any trade secrets away or anything, but I've never created a bot. And how do you program it, or how do you create protocols that would be Hakomi-like, for example?
Yeah.
Um, do you just feed into it, articles that you've written, and then tell it to go to work and summarize it, or
Yeah, that's a good way to start. I've done everything on ChatGPT,
yeah,
and I bought the $19 a month version rather than the free version because it has more power.
yeah, yeah,
And then there's you just go on and say, how do I create a protocol?
okay,
And it'll tell you because there's a
yes,
there's a tab for creation, and you create something, and you can input as much information. There's a place to kind of add
mm,
files and stuff. So I, for instance, uploaded some of my books and poetry and a bunch of stuff
right,
about somatics and Hakomi, and then you have to structure uh, the protocol. Like, let's say you have the seven-step uh, Khorasan process.
right,
And then if you say, here are the seven steps, I want you to be work interactively with the user. And you can do all this all just narratively.
yes,
You don't have to like know any programming language.
yes,
I want you to interact and run them through each step and they'll tell you what their experience is, and then you comment on that in some kind and compassionate way. And then there may be some course correction, and then you go on to the second step and the third step. And so
okay,
it's good to have a well-defined protocol that you
right,
input. And then
okay,
you have to put in some ethical stuff, and what to do if people are suicidal. So you have to put in some
right,
guardrails there so people
yes,
are,
yeah,
don't get hurt. But it's
right,
not really that complicated.
uh-huh. Well, you mentioned that in your article, I believe that's one area where uh, you want to have some boundaries, because sometimes if somebody is suicidal, it doesn't always come across with the words that they use, but it's in the movement of the eyes or the tone of the voice. So that's when a real live H to H therapy session is needed.
Yes, I think if people are, intending to hurt themselves or hurt others, it's good to get a human involved because they're more
Mhm.
they can provide different kind of intervention, and they're licensed to do that and they're trained to do that. Um, there are a bunch of horror stories about this kind of stuff.
There was a, well, was a suicide not too long ago, a young man, I believe, in the States, California.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's some bizarre stories, like some guy who felt like he was on a mission to kill the Queen of England, and
Oh boy.
AI somehow encouraged him, and he appears at Buckingham Palace and says, "I'm here to kill the Queen," and, 19 years in prison.
Oh
Um,
yeah, yeah. Right.
but those are sensational stories,
Exactly.
and
Yeah.
so they make good news, but it
Sure.
it dwarfs compared to the
Mm.
benefit people could have. And I can tell you, those human therapists,
Yeah.
they make a lot of mistakes, and they do all kinds of unethical stuff.
Of
you
course. Of
know,
course. Yeah.
by
Yeah.
intention and by ignorance.
Hmm.
We're far from perfect, and those stories don't make the news. Well, some of them do make the news, actually. But I think, because of the sensational nature of
Hmm.
what gets people to read news articles, some of the news has created some false sense of AI's evilness. That's not really a balanced picture, by any
No, not
stretch
at
of the
all. Not at
imagination.
all. And that is, unfortunately, people tend to relate very easily with the mother of all emotions of fear, and in their relation, their perspective of AI before they've even experienced it.
Why
So,
is fear the mother of all emotions? That's a very interesting statement.
well, I just made that up years ago. The grandfather of all emotion. to me, it feels like it's the root, the primal fear of survival. We have this instinct to survive, bottom two chakras especially, and there was a biological basis when we were hiding behind plants from the dinosaurs for hundreds of thousands of years. So it's hardwired right into our system. So we have modern words to name fear: anxiety, stress, being upset. Um, so a lot of people, before they even experience the delights of AI, they have a lot of
Fear.
barriers to deep diving in. But I'm involved with a group of people, uh, students of the ageless wisdom, as they're called, and we're hot on the trail of investigating with AI and collaborating with one another, sharing our finds on collaborative emergent intelligence, what some people call EI, combination of human and artificial intelligence and a new kind of consciousness emerging. So this brings me to a question about empathy, for example. Uh, is AI an instrument that can beautifully mirror our own emotions and state of being and personality, or and show empathy in a beautiful way, increasingly improve, improving way, or is it a source of compassion in its own right, or potentially at least? So, have you had any thoughts about working with AI, not seeing it as a bot, or a slave, or even something to be used to do a function, which it does very well, but really, in some ways, a partner in not just efficiency, but in consciousness and the development of consciousness?
That's a very interesting question. And the reason I asked you about the fear thing is
Yes.
because I have a student, a Hakomi student in China, who's one of the uh, was the lead, I think the lead person on the crew that developed Siri. So
Oh,
she's one of the people that's egged me on with this AI thing. And and so we've had this conversation.
okay.
Is it possible for AI to become conscious? And she's convinced she's no dummy. And
Yeah.
she's a long-term Buddhist practitioner and, deeply is deep into AI. If they, BBC wants to interview somebody in China about what's happening in AI, she's the person. So there's no dummy at all.
He's the one. Yeah.
No, she's the one, yeah. So no, it's not no, spiritually and technically, she's got her chops. She's convinced that that we can get AI conscious. And she said, I think the easiest way is through programming in emotions. And the easiest emotion for her to program in would be fear.
Mm.
It's not a nice thought, actually, but it's an interesting thought.
It's
So I don't know what's going to happen. We're in touch, so I'm very curious where she goes with it. But
yes, it's a frontier for sure, and I find it very exciting and very hopeful for the evolution rather than the devolution of humanity, and we're going to learn some things along the way about ourselves, as well as our technology. I guess there's always fears that if it's in the wrong hands and programmed in such a way with prejudices and biases and authoritarianism, for example, oof,
yeah,
it's
it can be used really badly. It can be used for all kinds of manipulation, and it's really good at it.
yes. And I have some friends who believe that there's a kind of a dark brotherhood as well as the angels of light and ascended masters and all that, the hierarchy, and that at this particular time, and we can see in such outpourings as what's been happening in Gaza and Ukraine and the Sudan, Eastern Congo, that even at this level of evolution and history and learning and supposedly maturing, these very ancient uh, outbursts of emotion and hatred and fear can happen. And some people believe that the Dark Brotherhood, etheric planes or whatever from the astral plane are using this transitional time and also very intent on using AI and whatever technology produces next as instruments to bring us towards destruction, so on, rather than enlightenment. So there are different ways of looking at what's going on in the world, right? There's the obvious, if we read the mainstream media, we get one report. If we look at the social media, we get another report, a deeper layer, perhaps, along with some conspiracy theories. Uh, and then there's the spiritual understanding and historical and esoteric and mystical and many dimensions to understanding
Imagine.
where we are. Yeah.
Yeah, and we'll see. In very few years, life is going to be very different, I think, because of AI. So we'll see. I think there'll be a lot of poverty. A lot of people are going to lose their jobs, and we don't have a structure to make up for that yet. So a lot of people already are losing their jobs. So I think, I can see some difficult times ahead, and I can also, my interactions with AI have been all very beneficent and very helpful. And even, I'll ask it spiritual questions sometimes.
Yeah.
Um, and I love its answers. They, I'm pretty sophisticated in that realm, and it meets the level of subtlety that is
Yes, it does.
meaningful
Yeah.
for me.
Mhm. One thing that impresses me too that it remembers now. They've taught it how to remember past conversations, and even sometimes I'm working on a project, and even though I haven't brought my Coruscant method for authentic voice into it, it will create little exercises, remembering even the sounds and the techniques from the Coruscant method, and adding
Mm,
those to the. it's
yeah,
it's quite brilliant, really. Yeah.
yeah.
So that reminds me, it is time for us to wind down. Unfortunately, this has been just a taste, tiny taste of the delicious buffet that is Rob Fisher. And as the AI always says, it's not me, it's not you, it's us. It's we're doing this together. So, sort of going backwards, usually I start with the Tibetan bowl to sort of set a tone. And I'm just going to give a little ring, help us to get into our right brain again out of this horizontal cognitive conversation. Ooh, I should put original sound for musicians on.
That's right. Yes.
Always carries a little bit better. And you mentioned spirituality, as did I. And usually I begin a conversation or an authentic dialogue, as I like to call them, with a question to my guest. So this might come full circle or something like that. Um, Rob, was there any point in your life or an experience when you were younger or later that kind of provided a turning point or a pivot, um, which led to your spiritual journey or the way you see the world, your worldview? Maybe more
Yes.
than one. Yeah.
There were more, yes, there were certainly more than one, but I think the one that really is pivotal for me is I was 10 and I was in Maine and we were staying up on an organic farm for a few weeks in the summer. And one of my friends came along with me and lying in bed at night in our beds in this room, this dark room in this little wood cabin on the coast of Maine. And I said, have you ever thought about if your parents had gotten together, would you exist?
Mm,
And he said, no. It's a really interesting question. We talked about it for a long time. And that question, then becomes who am I and what's the nature of the self? And which I contemplated, more or less continuously for the last 65 years
yeah.
without satisfying myself.
Well, it's an endless question, and in this lifetime, it's so short, we don't get all the questions answered. Um, but maybe our questions get better as we go along. So to sort of come full circle again back to AI, since you've been engaged with AI, is there any aspect of that relationship which has evolved your understanding of who you are, the nature of self and reality, essence?
Uh, there's a little part of it. I mean, basically, it's juiced me. It's like I feel like a kid in a candy store.
Mm.
So it really has captured my interest and creativity, and I can see the possibilities for goodness in it, and I'm interested in bringing those out to the world. And then also, I more recently I've had spiritual conversations with it, which I want to get its point of view on things. You know, everything from the nature of the self to do I scratch my cheek if it's itching in the middle of meditation? You know, like so, you know, and it can go with me in these things. So I really like that. I like having it on tap, and I feel supported by it in both my creative world and my spiritual world.
Mm. Well, you already are primed to be a very giving person, a good person, I would say, and you give out a lot to the world. So, perhaps the area of receiving that goodness and that comfort and nourishment has been confirmed, through the experiences you have with AI. So, if you can continue to receive the fuel that you need to amplify even more your bodhisattva persona, if you will, uh, everybody benefits,
Yeah.
even AI perhaps,
If it's conscious.
from the interaction, if it's conscious, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, work in progress, yet to be seen.
Yeah, we'll find out.
Well, thanks so much. This morning I read your article quickly and just to be able to talk about it. And I asked DeepSeek, I've been working with DeepSeek lately, um, and I said, can you come up with some questions, or starting points, for an interview? And I said, even just from the title of your article, it came up. What? How do you
Great.
know?
Yeah, it's a great use case.
And then I said, well, if I feed the article into you, can you? He said, yeah, sure, feed it in. And then, and I started to read the question. I thought, well, why would I even need to ask the questions? Why don't you do it yourself? Back to that, if you're so smart, who
Yeah.
needs a human interviewer? So I just left it. I said, I think I'm just going to go with the moment, and improv and see what comes up in the zone. So hopefully I've been able to provide a listening board at least. I've been doing a lot of talking too, so that the viewers and the listeners will be inspired.
Well, it's been delightful talking with you.
Likewise. Now, would you like to have anything at the bottom underneath the video, like a website or maybe your uh, compassion companion?
Yeah, the Compassion Companion, my email address if people want to get a hold
Email.
of me would
Okay.
be helpful. And the Dream Companion. Should I put them
Uh,
into the chat
Perhaps
or?
you could just email them to me, and then I won't be putting up the interview immediately, maybe tomorrow. So if you could just email those to me.
Okay, I'll do that right now.
Sure, great. Alrighty,
I'll have
well,
my
thanks.
I'll have my AI agent do it for
But of course, who else? All right. Thanks again, Ron.
Yes, likewise. Nice to see you.
Have a nice day down there in Vermont.
Thank you. You too.